And welcome everybody. I'm pleased to be joined today by Joanne Simons, the CEO of Northeast ARC, a human service agency that specializes in working with individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So thank you very much, Joanne, for agreeing to be interviewed today. Appreciate it.
Well, it's nice to be with you, Eric.
All right, well, thanks. Let's start with what's going on in the world today, which is really only one thing, COVID-19. So how has the Northeast ARC been impacted by COVID-19?
Well, before I get into how the Northeast ARC has been impacted by COVID-19, I actually want to back up a little bit on that opening question, which is that there are other things happening besides COVID-19. And I think what we are going to learn are that those organizations, companies, agencies that are looking not only to today, current COVID-19 and what's going to happen in the next month or day and 6 months, but we're also really looking ahead to how our businesses are going to continue to innovate and be successful in the future. And we're doing both of those. So as far as COVID goes, we are doing remarkable work in responding to the COVID crisis. The organization, the Northeast ARC, has many lines of businesses, and each of them are affected differently by COVID-19. Our direct service professionals who work in our group homes are facing the daunting task of working with, in some cases, people who are positive for COVID-19. Some have recovered already, and we are working like the rest of the country in trying to obtain adequate numbers of PPEs. We've become experts in
acquiring PPE.
Yeah, I know more about PPEs than I imagined that I would have.
Yeah.
We have also developed a respite site, a facility that we are not currently using because it's a day program site, has been repurposed to be a safe hotel-like environment for staff who are either positive for COVID-19 or who are working in a house with people that are positive, so they can have a safe place for which they can rest and relax and sleep, and most of all, protect their own families from the potential exposure.
Yeah, I can imagine the stress levels with staff are pretty high.
But what's remarkable is, we've heard this before, that not all heroes wear capes.
Right.
And it certainly is the example that our staff are so connected to the individuals that they support, and they're like family, and they love them like family. They've been taking care of them. They're part of their daily lives, and they haven't abandoned them. They're there. They're providing the supports that our families have come to expect from the Northeast ARC.
That's amazing. What's been so, being the CEO can have its, have its own stresses. What's been one of the bigger challenges for you as the leader of the Northeast ARC?
Well, I think making sure that we are going to emerge from this environment fiscally sound, programmatically superb, and ready for the future. Now, on the day-to-day level, I am inspired every day by the people who are coming to work. I'm grateful, humbled by them. I'm also worried about their workload. I'm worried about everybody that's coming to work. I'm worried about the 20% of our workforce that we had to furlough or reduce their hours. I'm worried about people who have, childcare issues. I worry about people who are, concerned for their own health and well-being. I'm concerned about maintaining the morale and the spirit here in the culture when you don't have the ability to be with people on a daily basis like we did. Part of what creates an organization culture, is being together and having shared experiences. And we've had to figure out how to do that in a new environment. Fortunately, Zoom and other forms of, Meetup and Facebook and FaceTime and
I know there's a million apps. You got I got people yelling at me like, oh, I didn't know that one. I know Zoom, but I didn't know Google Meets or,
Right.
Microsoft Teams or, the list goes on.
But we have actually been able to use this technology to provide families and the people we support with extraordinary touch points. And when I look back at our data in terms of what we did in April compared to what we did the last 2 weeks in March, which is when we began, it's extraordinary. I mean, some of our programs are actually flourishing in this new environment. Take early intervention, for example. We can go into a family's home through, an electronic modality when the child might not be feeling well, or, might have been an issue with transportation, and we're able to provide that support regardless. Now, on the other hand, there are some families who have some fatigue over the amount of Zooming that they might be doing.
For sure.
We're really seeing it. I'm getting letters and emails every day from families who are saying, thank you for what you're doing. The Friday night dances to be to have a Friday night dance for our son to go to, or a movie night, or the way that your autism support center has kept the autism community connected and served during this most isolating and difficult time is extraordinary. We've been continuing in our clinical services to provide, incredibly intense nursing services to some of the most critically ill children. That has happened without a beat. But, the emotional toll that it is taking on everybody, because everybody, nobody is in the same boat.
Yeah.
But we're all in the same storm. And I think about that every single day when I hear the stories about our staff or speak to people, or, somebody said to me, how many days they have gone without actually physically speaking to another human being. We're social beings. We all chose this career because we wanted to have contact with people. And our contact now has changed in ways that we didn't anticipate. Some of them are good ways, and some of them are going to endure long after the pandemic is behind us, because we have found that communicating with some parts of our service system electronically is much more efficient, much more effective, and much easier for the end user.
And so, I mean, you mentioned innovation in the beginning, and you're talking about kind of innovation now as it relates to, working with people virtually or remotely. Like, are there other things that you're seeing on the innovation front, or new ideas or things being brought into the conversation that, may not have been or may have needed a catastrophe like this to drive the urgency to change?
Well, yes. The ability to bill for electronic visits, it was jumped light years. The state relaxing its licensing requirements, for out-of-state nurses, for example. I mean, some of them were just really obvious. And even in our own business, we had wanted to have more remote workers, and we were getting pushback, and some divisions were saying to us, it's going to take a year to do this. Well, you know what? It happened in 3 days.
Right.
And it just goes to show that, innovation obviously is sometimes born from, great opportunities. And this one is a perfect example. I think that we haven't finished the story on innovation. I think when we're able to emerge from some of the day-to-day crises that everybody is dealing with with COVID-19, we'll be able to identify, and we'll be able to evaluate additional innovations, whether or not they're, so here's an anecdotal story that I'm hoping that we'll hear from. Some parents are reporting that their adult children who are no longer going to day programs, but have always lived at home.
Sure.
They're now at home 24/7. Their parents have noticed a decrease in their behaviors. So what is that going to do? And are we going to be open to listening as the families inform us on how we can improve our programs?
Yeah.
I think that I think it's a remarkable statement. And I think that we have a lot to learn by the way that we have traditionally provided services.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. Like, you bring up, in order to figure out what's working or what's not, you kind of got to connect to the folks you're serving and ask them, how are things going? What benefits are you receiving? I mean, even that, your organization is not small.
Right.
even that is a monumental task to kind of understand the impact that you're making. You see that as a big opportunity, obviously.
I think that we're going to be able to rewrite some of our the way we deliver services, and uh, especially in day programs. And it's going to be caused by, the mother of invention is, we're no longer going to be able to have large groups. They're not going to be able to move and mingle with other large groups. So they're going to be small groups, more homogeneous groups. I think we're going to do the same, hopefully the same thing with staff, that we're not going to have numbers of staff coming in and out of an environment. And I think with the consistency, the individuals that we support, we're going to see a decrease in their behaviors, which is, I think, what their families are seeing.
Yeah.
But the individuals know what to expect every single day. But when they come to some day programs, and whether or not they're relief staff, or whether or not they're agency staff, or there are permanent staff, I think it's another point that leads us to the workforce crisis that we were in prior to the pandemic, which continues to exist, that when we have workers who are not adequately compensated for the work that they do, they're working 2 or 3 jobs, and we're increasing the risk of infection, and we're increasing the confusion among the people that we support.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So when you look at the future, right? And I know the future kind of falls into a couple different categories here, like the immediate near term, maybe the next 3 to 6 months. And then beyond that, what opportunities do you see, or I guess, what decisions or things do you have to kind of shore up or get your hands around for the next few months? And then what stuff do you think you need to think about for the next, few years?
Well, for the next few months, we need to make sure we have adequate PPEs and training and protocols and cleaning, and being able to adhere whatever guidelines that are coming down to the government or through CDC.
Mm-hmm.
To make sure that we can operate on a day-to-day basis safely. We need to make sure that this individuals that we support, their families, and our staff feel safe coming to work. That's primary. Looking down 6 years from now, I think we are going to see that there are organizations, for example, that only provided day services, and they're not receiving adequate reimbursement during COVID, and whether or not they're going to be able to succeed. I think
Mm-hmm.
we are probably going to see more organizations think about whether or not they can actually stay in their lane anymore. But the need for diversification is really important, because this may not be the last pandemic in our lifetime. Well,
Yeah.
maybe it was my lifetime, probably not your lifetime.
Yeah. So when you look at that point around diversification and things like that, one of my questions is just, what advice would you give to other CEOs? But, you've got such a range of CEOs. You've got CEOs that maybe are managing and trying to, build an organization that may be $1 million or under. And then you've got the much larger ones, which can, be 50, 100 million plus in terms of size. And, the range is pretty significant in terms of the size of the agencies that are out there in human services. What thoughts do you have to kind of your fellow nonprofit CEOs that are out there, regardless of the agency, the size they run?
Well, I think that you bring up a great point and a great question, which is in there, but what I've seen during the pandemic is a great deal of partnership, and I think an increase in trust among CEOs. And I hope that that's one of the takeaways that will continue beyond the pandemic, is that we will see the opportunities for partnerships and collaborations, affiliations, mergers, whatever they take. But that I think it has really demonstrated that the larger organizations have the ability to do some things that the smaller organizations. And I'll give you an example. When it came down to ordering PPEs, for example, you can't place a small order.
Right.
And you needed to place an order about between at least $200,000 at a time. Well, the small agencies don't have the cash flow to be able to do it. They're not in a cash position to be able to float that kind of money. So you saw around the state, the larger providers stepping up on behalf of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So we took care of everybody in it, but the larger organizations were able to do that. And those same kinds of ability to be able to have the cash to be able to address some of these kinds of crises, I think demonstrated the weaknesses of,
Sure.
of our system. And I hope that some of these, and it's really not the CEOs that really need to be driving this entirely. You really have a board. Our boards of directors have to be sophisticated, and so do our funding sources, and that includes philanthropy
Yeah.
and our community
So
foundations.
when you look at philanthropy, for example, they used to or have a historical record of kind of giving to very specific things for very specific reasons, and in some cases, the grant amounts, you know, aren't as large as maybe needed, or focused in the right area, like capacity building, technology investments, and I do think there's some cutting edge, or I would say foundations that are out there that are kind of leading the charge, or maybe a little bit more ahead of the game than the other. But what do organizations need over the next couple of years from their funders?
Well, they need the same thing that they always needed, and that's really operating expenses, and we being trusted to know that we know how to spend them, whether or not it's in technology or it's just continuing to do the work that we do. I mean, there has to be the recognition, and in fact, COVID-19 actually shed a light on it, and I'm very pleased that a lot of philanthropy recognized this, is that these organizations are keeping our communities healthy, vibrant, and safe, and we need to protect them. And we saw more of our grants in this last 6 weeks be not specifically driven. And so I'll give you an example. We applied for a very specific Cummings Foundation grant for $100,000, a two-year grant, $50,000 a year. And they came back and said, we're going to give you $35,000 a year for 10 years. And we're providing some flexibility that normally wasn't there, because we recognize the need for the ongoing support, and we don't want to have you audition continually to have what you need to do. So I think that philanthropy hopefully is going to follow the suit. Another grant from the Essex Community Foundation was Essex County Community Foundation, same way, a COVID-19 grant, but it's not the kinds of strings attached. So I've seen the flexibility from government, from provider, and philanthropy. And we need to make sure that kind of flexibility continues post COVID.
Yeah, it would seem like if philanthropy could, adopt a few key players in the market, right, versus being so spread with so many different grants, or channeling donor grants down into a few key areas. That would make a big difference, because receiving a $10,000 grant or receiving a $100,000 grant can be a significant difference as a catalyst to kind of either getting you to make the necessary transformations, whether that's systems transformations or hiring some more staff capacity in key areas that you may need it. They got to be meaningful enough to be able to resource what you're looking to do, because as you get larger, those get more expensive, but typically it's the larger organizations that seem to, I call it the spheres of gravity, right? They're the ones that can, lead through a lot of these types of crises and pandemics and, whatever they may be, because they're just either diversified or just really well run.
I think we're seeing that on the philanthropy side. It's a little different on the corporate side, because corporate does philanthropy really for a different reason. And they're trying to keep their customers and their clients happy,
Sure.
or their communities. And so they have less of a role to play, I think, than some of the community foundations and larger philanthropists and foundations. And we're seeing that. So that's all good.
Great. Yeah, I would love to see corporate take more of that adoption role.
And some have, and some have.
Yeah. So any other messages you'd like to kind of throw out there around things that you've learned throughout this crisis, or things that you think are trending over the next several months or year?
I think it's really important to be able to look to the future, and so we were in a position where we ordered PPEs long before everybody else. We decided to close before anybody else. Not months before, but good leaders have the ability to see what's going to happen. I mean, I'm not hitting the puck where it is. I'm, looking to where the puck is going.
Right. Wayne Gretzky.
Wayne Gretzky. so we decided that we needed a place for, I mean, when I said to folks, let's turn our day program site into a respite facility and let's get some, beds in there and food, people thought I was crazy. And it's been filled, and we've had to develop additional sites at Salem State University. So what I've learned is to continue to trust myself, even when it may not seem in the moment to be the most popular thing to do. But every time that I don't do that, I wish I had.
Yeah.
And I think that's what leaders are. And we're not going to bat 1,000, but we're not going to make any shots that we didn't take.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can see some of the leaders and that are pulling through this, and they're actively engaged in, communication on multiple fronts. And then there's, some that maybe the complexity is too big and they don't understand. And I think this is an opportunity for them to, start conversations with others just as a mechanism of support. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned is every time I talk to a nonprofit leader, they were in their car driving to see you to get PPE, or something else. But it's great that you guys, especially in human services, just kind of gel when something bad happens. So I always like to end things on a high note. Is there a specific bright spot or success story, or just kind of like really powerful thing that happened during this crisis that stands out, that is kind of worth showcasing or mentioning?
So I think there are many, but one that comes to mind is we decided that we were going to place signs on all our residential programs, and it would say "Heroes Work Here, Northeast Arc." And the response has been overwhelmingly positive, that our staff are so proud of the work that they do that they want people to know. So now we're going to make bumper stickers for our to say that heroes drive this car. But it's the recognition, but I've also been enormously just moved by the personal sacrifices that people are making to keep the individuals that we care about safe, bringing medication to families' homes, giving food to families' homes, calling in and checking on, our elderly caregivers. It's the staff, they're moving. They're
Moving mountains to make it happen, right? Yeah, in some cases they've been away from their families. I mean,
for 2 weeks, some of them have volunteered to isolate for 2 weeks in an infected home. I mean, these are extraordinary people doing extraordinary work, and I salute them.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you taking the time today to speak with me, be interviewed. If you want to know more about the Northeast Arc, click the link below, direct you to their website. And as always, thank you for watching. We hope you like and subscribe to hear more from great leaders like Joanne. So thank you.